Hi guys, and welcome back to the Naya Care family. Today we're doing our vlogs again with our mom and dad. And again with us, we have Santi, our dad, and Megan. And so I'm gonna take a minute for them to introduce themselves again.
I'm Megan. I am the administrator for Naya Care. I came to Naya Care first with my daughter as a patient at the beginning of COVID, and quickly believed in what they were doing, and so I came on as the administrator.
And I am Santi. I am a new patient of Dr. Patel's because Dr. Patel does have multiple patients, the babies and the parents. And our baby boy was born over 2 months ago now. So we've been working with Dr. Patel for some time and got to benefit from a lot of her services. So I'm happy to be able to come on and discuss those with everyone.
Yeah. And I'm just, honestly, I say this so many times, but I'm just so honored that when people go through the services, they believe so much in the mission and the vision, and that they come on and support. So being said, today we're going to talk about a fun topic in going back to work after you have a baby. And since Santi's and the dads usually go back to work much earlier than the moms do, we're going to have Santi kick off of how he felt going back to work. So go ahead, Sandy.
I had a very interesting case. So I actually quit my job 1 month before the baby was born and became self-employed full-time, which is nice and also a blessing and a curse, right? The blessing is, well, I'm self-employed, so I can control my own schedule, but the curse is I therefore no longer have the paternity leave because, again, right, I have unlimited vacation with unlimited work now, so you can only choose one. So it was definitely a nice balance. I figured if I wanted to take this step in my life, it was kind of now or never, right? Once the baby comes and I'm comfortable receiving that paycheck and have that security blanket per se, then I thought I might not take that step in my career. So it was definitely a challenging step to take, but obviously with support from my wife, I did that. And so going back to work was never really going back. It was just maintaining the bare necessities while spending more time with my baby, and then little by little ramping up more of the work hours. So it was again a interesting balance, right? It was definitely not a 9 to 5 type of work schedule. Sometimes I would be up at 2, 3 in the morning and feel like I have the energy to get a little bit of work done, answer some emails, do some administrative stuff. And then maybe the rest of the day would just spend with baby, right? So I was working kind of out of pocket from my phone, just replying to a few emails or phone calls like that. And then come bedtime or nap time, I would go back to work, right? So again, the benefit of working from home, I think one of the biggest challenges there was mentally and physically. All I could think about and all I wanted to do was spend time with my baby, right? So it was actually very difficult being inside the house to be able to just close the door and focus on nothing but work. So what I found is a few days I would go to the coffee shop, and that way I would be there for 1 or 2 hours and it would be nothing but productive time. And then when I leave the coffee shop, I feel a little better, at least mentally, to spend time with the baby, right? Because it's also not how much time I spend, so not the quality, but or not the quantity, but the quality of the time that I was spending with the baby, right? If I was multitasking and working off my phone or thinking about something else, I realized it really wasn't worth, right? It wasn't quality time. So that balance and finding again the right routine, which the routine changed on a daily basis until I could find that right balance of getting a little bit of work done in certain hours of the day. When mom needed a break, I had the flexibility to be at home and be able to help with that. And I'd say, right now we're 2 months and change into having our baby, and I'm still trying to figure out that balance and that routine. So it's definitely nothing that came naturally. but I mean, it's been the best adventure of my life. So far so good.
I mean, that's you've highlighted so many amazing things. I mean, just to kind of unpack one of the things is you actually made this decision in COVID, in the pandemic, to go from being employed to self-employed. I mean, that is vast. Before we go into us women going back to work, I want to spend a little bit of time in this space when the dads go back to work. I actually was jealous of my husband when he went back to work, and the opportunity to step away for a couple of hours. I think when going into it, I mean, like initially I was like, okay, yes, I have to breastfeed, I have to do all of this thing. But 3-4 weeks into it, when I was feeling a little bit better, and I'm only drowning in breastfeeding and diapers, and I'm like, wait a minute. I mean, you get to go and leave, and the flip end was it that yes, of course, when he comes back, he's tired and he's trying to balance both of it. But just speaking from a mom's perspective, I was like, wow, you get to step out of this, you know?
That is a
So
great point. I actually, work related, but I went to play golf. I'm not good at golf, but I at least enjoy it. And it felt like a vacation, not in a bad way, right? Obviously, I missed my baby and wanted to be with the baby, but it definitely felt like a mini vacation. And the first thing I did when I got home is I told my wife, let me stay with him and you go out, whether it be to the grocery store, Target, just to drive around, whatever you want to do, because now I realize, right, is stepping away, is that a little bit of a break or mini vacation to just kind of rejuvenate yourself and be able to come back into really the 24/7 job, which is taking care of a baby. So yes, and it's challenging because, like you mentioned, Dr. Patel, you come back from work and you're tired, right? And taking care of a baby is very tiresome, but at least acknowledging and appreciating the fact that I got to step away and I just got a change of scenery, and wanting to give that to my wife so she could also get a little break and just recharge the batteries and then come back, and we can both be a team raising our baby. So absolutely, I think, yeah, it's definitely, you step away to work, but you still step away, right? You get that change of scenery that a lot of times mom just can't do.
Megan, what did you feel when your husband went back to work? Like,
I actually felt the opposite. I felt kind of bad for him because, especially because he had to go back so quickly. Um, I felt bad that he had to. I felt bad that he didn't get that leave with the job I was at the time. I had 13 weeks of maternity leave paid. He had no time. He had his vacation time. He had his sick time. And with COVID, I mean, his schedule was modified, so that did give us some extra time that he wouldn't have initially had. But I felt bad that he had to go back so quickly and had to miss those first few weeks.
It is definitely different, I would say, in my experience, not having to go back to an office, or some of my friends are contractors, right? So they have to go to job sites. So not having the choice and having to go back to work, I could definitely see what Megan's saying, that a lot of times you don't get to choose. You just have to go back to work, and now you're missing watching your baby from 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or whatever that might be. So it's definitely, I think everybody has a different perspective, but it's
yeah.
interesting to share.
And were
Yeah.
you offered paternity leave before you left your
I
job?
would I would have had, I believe it was 2 weeks of paternity leave, which is also not enough. But yeah, I would have had at least 2 weeks where, you at least disconnect and not worry about anything. So that's what one of the things I gave up, I guess, right? Switching to self-employed. But instead of having those 2 weeks to disconnect, being self-employed, I was able to have, 2 months of a flexible schedule.
Mhm.
So that's another nice thing, is after the 2 weeks of being completely disconnected, I didn't have to go back to a 9 to 5. I was able to more so balance that out and spread out the flexible schedule for now going on more than 2 months.
Megan, did your husband have, how long did he have off?
So he didn't have any paternity leave at all. He his schedule had been modified from a Monday through Friday schedule to like I think it was Sunday, Monday, Tuesday then he was working because of COVID, because they were trying to separate all the shifts and stay busy and not ultimately, lay them off. So he did have a modified schedule. So he took about like a week and a half off. It just so happened that right as we went into labor was right into the start of his first set of shifts. And so he took those few days off and then had ultimately like another week and a half off. So that was pretty nice. But after that, he did have to go back. But like I said, he was on a modified schedule. So we got lucky there where he did have a lot more time home than he would have initially had. But still I think it's definitely a big gap. I had 13 weeks paid, and I know still a lot of moms don't get that, but I mean most dads don't have any kind of leave, and they have to use their sick time and vacation time. And for him, his thought was, well, do I want to use that all right now? Like, what if she gets sick? What if something, you need my help? What about the holiday times? Do I want to take off time around the holiday times to be with her? So he has to factor taking that time too and make it all work together.
There's so much that goes into these decisions. And another interesting perspective as a dad, right, is you go back to work, and as new parents you're learning so much on a daily basis. You're not only like communication cues with the baby of like his hunger signs and his tired signs, and how to hold them when you're feeding him. So like there's so many learning lessons on a daily basis that as a dad, when you step away from work, you come back and you feel like you missed a lot of that, right? Like now mom is telling you how to do things because of her experience on a day-to-day basis, and now dad might feel like he's missing out, or mom is teaching him how to be a dad. And then like personally, right, like I would get defensive because I don't want my wife to teach me how to be a dad if we're both learning together. But at the same time, if I am working for 5 hours during the day, I did miss out on some learning lessons there. So it is a very interesting balance to try to continue to bond with your baby, right, and while at the same time not being able to spend so much time with the baby. It becomes difficult. And the worst thing I would say, like for dads to avoid is to have that separate you and your baby, right? I think I've seen this with some friends where like the mom's spending all day with the baby, the dad comes home from work, mom is kind of telling him how to do XYZ, and then the dad gets defensive and says, well, here's the baby back then, right? Like, you know how to do it, I don't know how to do it, so you take care of the baby. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics there to work through.
When I had my first, I was a resident. So meaning my husband's also a physician. So we were both in the grind of residency. And I didn't have that leisure in the sense of allowing myself to be like, Dad, you do, like, I need you to do it this certain way, because I was putting in the same hours. And I was like, I can't plan for every little step that you do. You're the dad, keep them alive. I'll be back. But that insight allowed me for my other ones to step away, to be like, okay, you might not be doing the way that I'm doing it because, I've been with them the longest or however, but going back to work in residency allowed me to be like, okay, yeah, you're the dad. You're going to do it. You're going to do what it takes to keep your baby happy, alive, healthy. It might not be what I want or how I do it, but that was a really very valuable lesson, because this allowed me to not only continue my career, because there were times where we were on call and we're a call on opposite days, to go do a fellowship, gave me a little bit more freedom to kind of figure out what I needed to do and how I wanted to do it as well. But I think that's a very valuable lesson too for dads. No, so sorry, for moms to hear that, just step back. Let's dads be dads. So unless they're doing something stupid, but still.
Absolutely. Yes.
But still,
yes.
they get peed on a couple of times, they'll figure it out. It's like, that's how you
Yeah.
figured it out. So
That's a
yes.
good perspective, though. Yeah, a lot of times there's not one right way to do things, right? A lot of times there's different ways to accomplish the same thing. So, yeah, that's nice to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. And so just kind of leading into it, like I said, going back to work for me was very different. It was grueling hours in residency and fellowship. I had a little bit, well, as an attending after all my training was done, I knew I had to go back to, no, sorry, I knew I wanted to go back to work. And I think that's the difference, right? It's what I wanted to do and how I wanted to accomplish this versus I was very fortunate that I didn't have to be forced to go back to work because of a financial reason. It was like, this was my identity. I wanted to do this. And I have an amazing, amazing supportive husband. But being that said, I just remember we was dropping my son to daycare. It was like my whole life fell apart in front of me. One of my friends had actually had a baby 6 months early, and she said, when you drop them, make sure that you allot an hour just for yourself, because it was this transition from I've had this baby in me for 10 months. I've been taking care of him for 2 months. And all of a sudden I'm supposed to leave him with a stranger and it's okay. So I still remember
your baby
that.
was 2 months old when you dropped him off at daycare?
Actually 9 weeks. Yeah. Yep. 9 weeks old.
I couldn't imagine. Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
Yeah. And because we were in training. So it was just like, you had to finish it, right? Otherwise,
of course,
all what you've worked up for. And I think that's the thing that moms, the hormones don't help either. And I think dads deal with it too. And I like the fact that we're recognizing more stay-at-home dads in that case as well, because they come to this this pathway. They have to make a choice, and neither choice seems very, I don't know, just doesn't seem right. But then you go through it. But I still remember the first time I had to drop him and I cried. And then the next couple of times we were a little bit financially better, so I was able to have a nanny. So I didn't have to actually physically take my kids somewhere to do that. But yeah, that's just a heartbreak of taking your kid to a daycare and like, okay, and the struggles that I think moms go through. So Megan, jump in here, because I know you joined Naya Care for kind of some similar reasons.
Well, first I want to ask you, because I want to see if it was similar. How did you feel when you were at work? Did you feel more distracted or more torn? Like you wanted to be with your baby? And I felt like it was harder to focus when I went back to work.
So luckily for me, I found we had an in-home daycare, and she took care of him, like my friend's 6-month-old. So I had a friend who she was a residency friend, so she'd already gone through it, and she was really able to help me transition through it. And that daycare lady, Miss Peggy, I will never forget her. She was awesome. She would send me pictures a lot, or I would call and find if everything was okay. We also had like a staging thing. So like the week before we were going back, I would drop him for 2 hours, or I'd drop him for an hour just to get myself comfortable and get comfortable with the situation. And then the first couple of days, and luckily I went back into work because we have different rotations where you didn't have to do patient care right away, where you could also be eased back into work. So I would work like 5 hours, or I would work 6 hours. And then when you did inpatient care, we were in the system for about, now it was 2 months. So now he's 4 months old, and he was thriving, and we were better with that. So when patient care came, it just worked out in my favor, I think, that I was able to manipulate things. But I'll tell you one thing, as soon as I got comfortable, because I think it's me getting comfortable also, and we had a great daycare. Miss Peggy was amazing. She was awesome. She loved my child as much as I did. You could see it. I would take advantage and be like, okay, we're paying for how many hours we paid for daycare, and I'm off of work. I think I'm going to go to the gym now. And I started becoming okay with that, to be like, okay, I want to go back and become more healthy, and I'm going to go and do that. But it was definitely a transition. I don't think I was lucky enough not to kind of just go into patient care. And it was just like an easing myself into it.
That last piece that you mentioned there, going to the gym, I think it's important. It's difficult, right? Because sometimes you feel guilty. You're like, I'm out of work. I should pick them up early or her early. But it's also important for you to take care of yourself first, right? To be a better mother, better wife, better husband. So that self-care, which is something Dr. Patel always reminded us when she would visit us here at home, is important, right? If you're healthy and you're in a good mental space, then you can be that much better for the baby. And then to Megan's question, one thing to point out for me, what I saw is it depends on what type of work I was doing, right? So if I'm like in a meeting or in something that requires me to be in the moment, I was able or still am able to focus on that. But with the administrative work or things that could be put off, right, or where I can become a procrastinator, those are the things that have become very difficult to get done because I just put them off and go see the baby. So it's definitely a balance for me. Like when I need to be somewhere and I have a meeting with someone, that's no problem. But when I need to sit down and get things done, that's where I started to go to the coffee shop in order to focus, right? Because what I would tell myself is I'm here, right? I'm away from the baby, whether it be an office, a co-working space, or a coffee shop. Like I'm away from the baby anyway. I might as well be productive to make it worth the time away from the baby. Then I can go back. It was very difficult to get those administrative tasks done at home because obviously I would just choose the baby over that.
I was told, Megan, I know from one person, two actually, because I have 4 kids and now I've been raising them for 15 years, but twice in my life I had been told that, oh, your nanny's raising your kids, you aren't. And so I think as a working mother, you encounter those kind of statements. It's like, oh, but you're taking them to daycare for X many hours. How are you raising your child? And you're just like, oh my God, I am raising my child. I'm trying to balance everything for them. But yeah, it's difficult, I think. Well,
People are always going to judge as well and have their own opinion.
mm-hmm. Yep. So Megan, what about you before we even dive into more of this conversation?
So I obviously had my daughter at the beginning of COVID, and so I had went on leave a little bit early because of COVID and because, potentially being at risk, and I worked at a bank. And so I had closer to, I think it was 14 and a half, 15 weeks of leave. And by the time I was about, I think 2 weeks into having the baby, I just really knew that I did not want to go back. Like I felt like my place was to be home with her and take care of her. We had care arranged with my mom, but we were really apprehensive because my stepdad worked as a paramedic. And so that meant he was constantly exposed and out in the middle of all of it. And we were already taking measures such as having ear care come to our house and not taking her anywhere to avoid all that stuff. So sending her to my mom's house was definitely a big concern. And I really was not at all ready. So I think at that point, that's when I first contacted you, and you weren't quite there yet. So, I kept looking for every avenue, working from home. I knew that I couldn't do a customer service type job, especially with her by myself. Any mom that can do that for 8 hours a day and take care of their kid at once, I praise you up and down, because I can't barely get a half-hour task done with my little one here. And so I ended up going back to work. We did the test trials, like you said, and my mom lives about 25 minutes away from us. I bawled like the entire way there. I cried when we left. I had such a hard time with it. And like you said, I think it was hormones too. But I mean, even now, I'm going to admit, I still have a lot of difficulty leaving her without me here. I feel like I know everybody can take care of her, but I feel like I'm just the answer to everything. Um, so I went back to work and I was also pumping, and that became really difficult to keep everything clean. I didn't really have a space to pump. So I ended up getting a pump that I could hide and wear. And I did that while I was working because I also didn't feel like I had the flexibility with my job to stop and step away and pump. I went back to a job where I had a lot of seniority. I had a lot of pull, and I went back and I felt like I had lost all of that in 3 months on maternity leave and just felt very out of place. Like I at that point I just felt like I needed to be home. So we tweaked some things around, and 2 months later I ended up leaving my position and decided to come home, and we decided to live off some of the money that we had saved up and basically kind of wing it, and I'd figure it out. And then I got the call from you that you were looking and you were ready. And so I stepped into this position. It's worked for me to be at home, but like you said, it's a balancing act. I literally feel like I go all day. I wake up with her, I cook for her, I play with her, then she goes down to nap. I do my work stuff during her nap. She gets up, we play, we do dinner, she goes to bed. I do other house chores and other things that you need to be done, and then some work. Sometimes I don't stop till midnight, but the trade-off, like you said, it's worth it to be more here and more present. And I feel like there's things my daughter's very ahead in it, and I feel like because I've stayed home and had that ability to do it, um, she's been able to have those advantages that I guess she wouldn't have had if I wasn't here.
I had to grapple with the fact that all my 20s were devoted to becoming a doctor, with all the studies and all the, like, I'd sacrificed like the going out and, just being a rowdy 20-year-old. And like, was I just going to put that on the side? I think with any woman who's going back in any type of career, or even now more so dads also, is just that you come to this fork in the road and say, okay, what's important? Like, not in the sense of, I think what's important to me, because Santi, like you mentioned, why I say self-care and identity, because you know what, if I wouldn't have been happy, I wouldn't have that's how I rear my kids then, because I would be constantly not happy. And I tried the stay-at-home stint for 3 months, I think, with my second. And bless you, stay-at-home mamas. Megan, I do not know. I know you work for me, but my goodness, the constant going. I was just like, and I felt I was not a good stay-at-home mom. I was a better working mom, because then I was more organized. And so I knew where, like, I compartmentalized a lot of my stuff. Is like, this is, like you said, Sandy, these 2 hours were just going to be productive. So I knew when I was going to step away from work, or when I was at work, it was just work. And I had a good nanny that was helping me in the background, and she would only, text me and stuff when it was really dear and needed. But when I came home, it was just home. And all I did was spend my time at home. So that balancing, but no, I did try to be a stay-at-home mom, and oof, Megan, hats off, man. Like that, I completely failed at that part of it. So
Yeah, I think juggling both, which it seems like all three of us here are doing, is a good experience to talk about quality over quantity, right? So in any aspect of life, both going to the gym, I'm sure you're going to work harder in the gym knowing I'm away from my baby, I'm away from work, I better make it worth it. And same with work, and same with a baby, right? When you're with a baby, then you got to separate everything else so that that time is really worth it. So that to me has made it easier to try to balance everything out, and just becoming a better person every day, right? Like, that's all I can try to do for the baby. To Megan's point, it is very interesting to see. I mean, I was so ignorant to everything that it takes to raise a child. I mean, obviously, I am the son to a mom and dad, and I have a sister who has two little ones. And even with that, I was so ignorant before going through this experience myself as to, the the pumping, right? Like, I mean, it's a 24/7 job. You can't stop. You risk actually your health if you don't pump. So that's very important. And then just being away from the baby, all the hormones, everything that's going on. It's crazy to see how as humans we've gone through this for so long, but we don't really accommodate for one another, right? Like at the office, like Megan was saying, there's no room for a mom to go pump. Just now I'm starting to see and hear of like airports having pods for a mom to feed or pump, right? Like breastfeeding in public, it's still such a taboo that, my wife is like, should I cover myself? Should I not cover myself? If I don't cover myself, I make it so awkward for everybody else, and then they make it awkward for me. So I think, I was hoping joining the parent club that there would be more services like Naya Care and more people like us three here who can relate with each other, know that we've gone through this, and try to help each other out, right? Like it's somewhat frustrating to see businesses so far behind with childcare or with just certain benefits, even if it's just a comfortable room for mom to pump. So it's a blessing and a curse, I guess, right? Because the blessing is that it brings like-minded people together, like the folks here and the folks that get to leverage Naya Care services. But it also opens up my eyes to what I was so ignorant to before, which is really, I mean, I think the world and unfortunately where we live in the US, like paternity leave sometimes doesn't exist. Sometimes it's too short, maternity leave as well. And then when mom's going back to work, like Megan was mentioning, right, you went from like a senior position where you felt like you had somewhat like power, right, and a say in the office, to now all of a sudden feeling like you lose all that because you're not even comfortable in the place where you've been working and where you feel like you have this seniority. You don't even have a comfortable place to pump. So it is very eye-opening experience, not only becoming a dad, but seeing also the world and how we accommodate parents or don't accommodate parents. But I'm glad we're here, right? And again, I'm glad, Dr. Patel, you took the risk you did leaving your job to start Naya Care so that we can hopefully move in the right direction as a community.
So on those two notes, so there are laws in Colorado that you can demand your employers to provide adequate breastfeeding areas. If you're anywhere in Colorado, just contact the public health department and they will steer you right, because the laws support that. Even if you're working at like a Burger King, there are ways, and I don't think people are aware of that, that they're there.
I would say, at least me personally, I'm definitely not aware of that. So I think this is a great point of our blog and time together to highlight, right? Those fun facts are very important.
Yep. And then I had the privilege of actually sitting in the room where the paid family leave that we just passed last year was being formulated, and had the voice, and I was able to be one of the speakers, not only in the legislation, but when we actually had our rally and everything, and just super excited after 6-7 years. It got passed and it should be starting to be implemented in 2024. So those are the couple of laws. But I don't think, like you said, Santi, you get aware of stuff and then you're like, wait a minute, there's laws to support this? Wait, how did I not know about that? So, but just wanted to point out those two things of what you had brought up. So
yeah, and I was oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, definitely appreciate your efforts there and bringing awareness to them, right? Like if the law's there but nobody knows about them, then it's useless. So it's nice to have you leading the pack there and bringing awareness to all of us around you and the community.
See, and I was aware of the laws. The place I was in, though, I knew it had to have been within reason that they provide a space, but where I was at, the only reasonable space that would have been even able to be provided would have been the bathroom for me. There wasn't, where we were was such a small area. It wasn't a typical bank. It was a stand-up kind of bank, and they had put the whole staff into there. So I knew I felt so uncomfortable when I went back as it was. I think that's the thing. Like, we know that there are things that protect us when we go back, and even while we're on leave and even while we're pregnant. But I think there's still a certain level of you feel uncomfortable. I know that you're protected if you blow the whistle on those things, but you feel uncomfortable. You can't stop people from making you feel outside the loop. And like I said, I went from the place I worked, I had ran this particular branch pretty much by myself at one point for over a year. Um, so I went from having all this pull and all this stay there to feeling very on the outside when I came back. And I didn't want to feel any more on the outside than I already did. And I'm actually friends with another mom that works there, and she had similar feelings when she went back. She felt very uncomfortable about how she would even breastfeed. She was asking me questions about how I did it and how I went about it. So I think it goes back to what you said. I think people need to be more accommodating to moms and dads when they go back to work. We're trying to figure out how we even do this. Pumping at work is a full-time job on top of your job. You're literally pumping, you finish, you clean up, and before you know it, you're setting up to do it again. And you've got to figure out how to correctly break out of work to do that. And you got to take care of it. And then you're thinking about your baby. And like you said, you're getting the updates from the babysitter, the little pictures. So you've got that too. And your job. It's a lot for us to balance. And dads, they're worried about what mom's doing when they go back. They're worried about how baby's doing. There needs to be a lot more accommodation and a lot more easing back into the job and a lot more acceptance of what the parents have been through before they come back.
What you've just said actually highlights, literally sums up the literature that is supporting paid family leave, because those companies that actually offer paid family leaves, their employees and stay there longer and are more, they're more committed to that company. So exactly. And I think accommodations in the sense of, like, yes, of course, a good space to pump, a nice areas to do that, and that go along with the public health department regulations, right? Because the place needs to be clean. You need to provide places where you can clean your pump parts, of reducing viral and bacterial thing, but also the understanding. I think the accommodation is one side, but just overall understanding of, this person was so important to our company and they did so much, but they just might need a little adjustment coming back to work. And so this overall understanding of it. I was super lucky. I had amazing role models in residency. We had, in my third year when I was an intern, I had two residents, so two physician doctors, who actually had two babies in this 3-year period. And they would pump, and so everybody got comfortable pumping, like with us female residents pumping. They would nurse in the call rooms, because their husbands or spouses would bring the babies, and when they had a minute of break, instead of pumping, they would nurse. And it started fostering this culture of, like, oh, so when I became a 3rd-year resident and I had my baby too, I was like, oh, my husband would bring the baby to me when I was on call, and if I had a chance, I was able to nurse, and that was just accepted. It wasn't like, oh my God, she's doing it again. I think just having people that have gone through it. We had a couple of male residents, and they're like, oh yeah, you're pumping. So this overall understanding from both perspective was really helpful and encouraging to have a child in residency. So yeah.
I think that highlights, it's not only at a regulatory level that efforts need to be made to establish these laws and regulations to protect parents, but also at a company level, right? No matter the size of the company, it might be Fortune 500 or a small mom and pop, but having that culture is priceless. I think, obviously I'm sure statistics that show that people stay there longer, that the quality of work is better, maybe, and now we're talking about this 4-day work week versus 5-day work week. And, just again, to me, it just, the quality versus quantity always comes back, right? Like if you're sitting in front of your desk for 5 hours, but you concentrate for 15 minutes, what was the point, right? So I think that culture, that company culture, is an important thing to highlight, what a lot of people, business owners and also employees, can make an effort, even though you might not think you can change the laws or you can change the company. At least make an effort for the culture to be one way. I hate to see when people have the attitude of, oh, I figured it out, so you'll figure it out as well, you'll be okay, right? Where it's like, you figured out that there was obstacles that had to be overcome, and instead of just saying I crossed the bridge and then burn it, or figure out how to cross it yourself, let's take 1 second to look back and say, how can we improve this for the next person that's going to cross, right? Maybe you're not going to have another baby yourself, maybe you are, right? So maybe you're going to have to cross that bridge again, but don't be so quick to forget just because you've gone through it and now the next person's going to figure it out. Let's just, as a community, take a second to look back and say, how can we improve this for each other?
Right. I think that's a perfect place to end. So thank you, Santi. Before we completely end, what's one tip that you guys think that you'd like to relay to your counterpart when going back to work? So I can start. So as a working mom, going back to work, one tip is particularly if you're in the corporate world, if you could schedule your pump breaks as you would schedule meetings, like 15, 20 minutes. So then everyone is aware that you are, when they look at your calendar, they're like, oh, okay, that one is blocked. And then my response is smokers take breaks, so breastfeeding moms need to take break too, and that should just be part of it. But that's one tip that really helped schedule pumping, that I knew when, and everybody around me knew. It was like, okay, I'm taking 15, 20 minutes break to pump, but then when I'm back in it, I'm going to start working. So that's why one tip that I would give working mamas.
I think mine would be just advocating for yourself. Ultimately, I left my position, but I think there were certain things that I advocated for myself. And the biggest thing was that I was not the same person as I was before I went on leave. I came back a mom, and I wasn't single, but I had an individual life before I went in. So I had all this availability, and I definitely had to advocate that now I have a schedule. Now my availability is not the same. Now I have these priorities out of work. I'm going to advocate that, I'm here to do my job, and I'm going to still be the same person doing my job. But there were things that, like the pumping and everything, that needed to change. And I had to try to advocate, and I should have advocated more for my situation.
No, not too much, Megan, then you wouldn't be here.
True. And I'm actually way happier doing what I'm doing. Longevity wise, I planned on staying where I was. I was in a good position, but I'm so blessed to have the opportunity to have, and the fact that you give me the flexibility to be a mom and bring home income. So I am way better off.
And I think even leaving, you do advocate, right, not only for yourself, but for the next people to go through that experience. Hopefully the company would do an exit interview and understand why they lost such a senior tenured employee. So, even not being there still, I think that step hopefully would advocate and speak up for yourself and the rest. Mine would be, I think, time management and quality over quantity. I realized, even though, yes, I could hold my baby and answer emails on my phone, I'm not doing either of them well, right? So there's no point. Like I'm somewhat of a perfectionist, and I would much rather not spread myself thin or try to boil the ocean. I'd rather have the 2 hours set aside for work where I know, unfortunately, I'm not going to be with the baby, I'm not going to see the baby or hold the baby, but because that's the opportunity cost, that's what I'm giving up, I'm going to make sure those 2 hours are going to be very productive. And I've realized I can even fit what used to take me 3 or 4 hours of work into 2 hours. And then I can go home, be with the baby, and put my phone aside. So I think in everything, not only time spent with the baby, but time spent at work or with friends, family, at the gym, just quality over quantity is important for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been an awesome, amazing conversation. So thank you. We'll leave it at that.
Of course. Always a pleasure. Thank you guys for what you do. We'll talk again soon.
Yep. Bye.